Afternoon. National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon, questions to the First Minister. Question 1, Clear Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am ddiwygiadau i'r polisi amaeth cyffredin?
Wel, nath y Gweinidog cyfoeth naturiol a bwyd datganiad ar ei benderfyniadau ynghylch taliadau uniongyrchol i ffermwyr ar y bedwerydd ar 10 o Ionawr.
Diolch Prif Weinidog. Nawr, mi nath y Gweinidog, wrth gwrs, y datganiad ynglyn â trosglwyddo 15% mewn llythyr i gadeirydd pwyllgor yn y cynulliad yn hytrach nag mewn datganiad fan hyn i'r Senedd neu datganiad ysgrifenedig. Mi wnaethbwyd y diwygiadau hefyd, wrth gwrs, heb yn bod ni'n ymwybodol o ganlyniadau adolygiad cydnerthedd y diwydiant Kevin Roberts. Mi wnaethbwyd hefyd heb wybod beth oedd bwriad y Llywodraeth o safbwynt y cynllun datblygu gwledig. A nawr mae ffermwyr Cymru yn derbyn llythyr digon swta yn ôl yr ymateb dwi'n gael, yn dweud wrthyn nhw bod gwerthu entitlements nhw'n disgyn o hyd at chwarter yn ei gwerth. Oeddech chi'n meddwl bod hi'n amser i Lywodraeth Cymru ymddiheuro am y modd dilornus i chi wedi trin ffermwyr Cymru?
Wel, dwi'n gwybod, mae'n record dros bend yng Nghymru yn gael ffordd i trin ffermwyr Cymru, ac wrth gwrs nod y Llywodraeth i sicrhau bod gyda ni diwydiant sydd yn gynaliadwy yn economaidd yn dyfodol. A yna beth yw nod, wrth gwrs, y datganiadau sydd wedi cael ei wneud gan y Gweinidog.
Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, we know that all European countries agreed a 13% cut to the CAP budget. However, your government has decided to disadvantage Welsh farmers by implementing the maximum transfer of 15% from Pillar 1 to Pillar 2. First Minister, do you accept that other European countries have lower pillar transfer rates than Wales? England 12%, Scotland 9.5%, Northern Ireland 0%, France 3% and Germany 4.5%, and that this puts Welsh farmers at a competitive disadvantage at a time when average farm business income in Wales fell by 30%.
Well, first of all, of course, this is not money lost to farming. It's simply being accessed in a different way through Pillar 2. Secondly, of course, I believe it is in the longer-term interest of Welsh farmers to do this. Those countries who do not put more money aside for rural development will see their farming industry decline slowly over time. In Wales, we are investing in farms to make sure they are more sustainable. Economically, that is not being done in other countries, and it should.
Aled Roberts.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, dych chi'n sôn am orddibyniaeth ar gymorth daliadau, ond beth sy'n poeni ni ydy natur y symud o un system i'r llall, lle fydd ffermwyr Cymru o dan adfantais o ran y ffordd maen nhw'n gallu cystadlu efo gwledydd megis Iwerddon. Oedd hynny rhan o'r ystyriaeth pan wnaethbwyd y datganiad gan y Gweinidog?
Unwaith to, mae'r argraff yn cael ei roi bod hwn yn arian sydd wedi cael ei golli i ffermwyr Cymru. Dwi'n ddim yn wir. Mae'r arian dal i fod ar gael, ond wrth gwrs bydd yr arian cael ei ddefnyddio mewn ffordd gwahanol a mewn ffordd i sicrhau gynaladwyeth ffermio yng Nghymru yn y tymor hir. A wy'n credu dyna'r ffordd call i symud ymlaen.
Question 2, Jonathan Saunders.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on publicising Welsh Government targets for inward investment?
Yes, our target for this year is 8,500 new and safeguarded jobs.
First Minister, during the Welsh Conservative debate last week on our inward investment proposals, Destination Cymru, your Economy Minister stated that we do have clear targets. My officials have clear targets. Can you confirm that there really are indeed targets? And if there are, why are you not publishing them?
I just said so. I don't know if the member heard the answer, but I've just given the answer that she's asked to the question that she asked. It's on the record.
Have you finished?
The question was, why are you not publishing them?
I didn't ask you to ask him another question. I asked you to be quiet. Alan Fred Jones.
Wel, o'n i'r cwestiwn tan. Ydych chi wedi cyhoeddi targedau ar gyfer mewn fuddsoddi yng Nghymru?
Wel, ni'n gwybod wrth gwrs bod mewn fuddsoddi wedi cynnal o tua 200 dros y flwyddyn diwetha, ac wrth gwrs ni wedi sicrhau bod y twf yn parhau yn y dyfodol.
We now move to questions from the party leaders. And first this afternoon, we have the Leader of the Opposition, Andrew David.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I've asked you many times about enterprise zones, and sadly I've been increasingly disappointed by the response that I and others are getting. The Finance Committee here in the Assembly said in their report that there was something of a mystery about the enterprise zones that the government have brought forward. We support the concept of enterprise zones here on this side of the House, but sadly, time and time again, when you're trying to understand what impact they are making to the economy of Wales in job creation and investment made, it is becoming increasingly impossible to try and find this data out. Why are you being so evasive as to the measures that need to be put in place to see whether enterprise zones are a success or not?
Well, they are a success. We know that 2,000 jobs have been created or safeguarded. We know, for example, that 30 firms have had their applications approved in terms of financial support. And we know, of course, that when compared to the enterprise zones in England, they're far more successful, given the fact that we know that in England, only 1/10 of the jobs have been created that were originally planned.
Well, in England, for example, since you brought it up, First Minister, I can talk about 250 new businesses who've been created, £1.1 billion worth of private sector investment, and over 7,000 local jobs created. What we do know in Wales is that, sadly, people are actually pulling out of the enterprise zones. Manchester Airport, for example, have just withdrawn their advertisements from the Deeside enterprise zone because they don't believe it's commercially viable. They don't. You have not chosen to actually exercise any local development orders which would assist the planning process in those enterprise zones, something which many businesses say are one of the biggest obstacles they find when planning new investment, is the planning process. How confident are you that at the end of this Assembly term, your government will be able to say enterprise zones here in Wales have been a success and have created the new jobs that we require here in Wales?
Well, I mean, 2,000 jobs in Wales, 7,000 in England. Compared to the populations, that's pretty good going. And should have done his work in terms of Manchester Airport. What actually happened was the advert was there for Deeside Enterprise Zone in Manchester Airport, not an advert in Deeside Enterprise Zone. We paid for the advert for Deeside Enterprise Zone to be put up in the airport, and there was some in the airport that took exception to it. But nevertheless, we did actually pay for it. But if that's an example of somebody pulling out of an enterprise zone, I fail to see how that works when we paid for the advert to go to Manchester Airport, not the other way around.
I think what it shows is a lack of confidence in the offer that you are having for enterprise zones. And I did ask you, are you confident about the success of enterprise zones here in Wales? If I take Snowdonia Enterprise Zone, for example, the response that we've had about Snowdonia Enterprise Zone is, and I quote, Snowdonia Enterprise Zone has not yet completed being developed sufficiently to attract investment. In other words, nothing has gone in there. How on earth can you be confident, after 2.5 years of enterprise zones existing in Wales, that we are not seeing the progress that you've initially promised, and above all, trying to find out how these enterprise zones will progress is like wading through treacle, First Minister?
Well, what we do know is that he doesn't know what he's talking about and he's trying to bluff his way loudly out of it, which is the normal approach that we get from the leader of the opposition. Coming back, of course, to the point that I made in terms of the jobs safeguarded and created. It's true to say that Deeside is easier in terms of attracting investment at this moment in time than Snowdonia. Historically, that's been the case, and Snowdonia needs more work. But nevertheless, we have created the enterprise zone in Snowdonia. You can bet your bottom dollar the UK government would never have done that because it had been too hard. You know, let's only look at the areas that are easy the UK government's approach would have been. But if you look at all the figures with regard to enterprise zones in Wales, whether it's jobs created, jobs safeguarded, or in terms of businesses that are receiving support, Wales is doing, once again, better than England.
We now move to the leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, as you know, Vince Cable and the Liberal Democrats have been pushing the idea of a mansion tax on properties over £2 million, which was today described as punitive by the Tories. Now, First Minister, I know that we don't always see eye to eye in this chamber, but would you agree with me that Andrew R.T. Davis's concerns to protect super-rich property owners in the southeast of England are misplaced?
Not surprised, but clearly I'm concerned, and it is unusual for me to be asked to comment on something somebody else has said, but clearly from what the Conservatives have been saying is they object strongly to something that doesn't actually exist in Wales. That they say that the mansion tax is a disincentive to investment, even though we know that there are no houses in Wales that have been sold for more than £2 million. Again, an example of completely confused thinking, not thinking things through, another example of which we saw in the chamber earlier on.
Well, First Minister, if we could move from the concerns of the super-rich in England to the concerns of ordinary parents in Wales. Last year, your colleague and former Labour Cabinet Minister Alan Milburn said in his social mobility report that too little attention is paid to a child's first 5 years, and that pupil premium should be extended to all eligible nursery pupils. Has your government carried out an assessment of the benefits of extending the pupil deprivation grant to under 5s here in Wales?
No, we haven't, of course. The pupil deprivation grant was something that was agreed between ourselves as parties as part of budget negotiations, and the PDG has been continued, but there have been no plans to extend it to nursery at this stage, and no costings have been done.
Milburn's report, he also highlighted the stark difference between pupils in England and Wales, and he noted that at the age of 5, the poorest pupils here in Wales were already falling behind their counterparts in England. First Minister, to extend the pupil premium to under 5s in Wales would actually cost £10 million and could make a real difference to the life chances of our most disadvantaged young people. Don't you agree with me that this could indeed make a real difference at a relatively small cost, and would finally give a good news story for Welsh education and show that Wales was leading the way?
Well, sadly, no cost is small these days, but certainly it is an issue, no doubt, that the Education Minister may well look to consider in the future. But again, we have to bear in mind the fact that that money is not easy to find at this moment in time. Nevertheless, I'm sure these are matters that can be discussed, bearing in mind, of course, the current financial situation. But I take the point that she makes that we have PDG, of course, for other pupils. There may be a case for extending it to nursery pupils. That will have to be assessed, and of course the financial situation evaluated.
Ac yn ola Arwenydd Blaid Cymru, Liam Wood.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, have your officials made an assessment as to the full impact of the bedroom tax in this country? Yesterday, your party decided to support the Scottish National Party's budget in Scotland, which could lead to the effective abolition of the bedroom tax there. Can you tell us how much would it cost us to replicate that policy here in Wales?
Based on the Scottish experience, somewhere along the lines of 10 million.
Thank you, First Minister. The Scottish Government is requesting that Westminster lift the cap on discretionary housing payments so that the bedroom tax shortfall can be made up through that mechanism. If successful, the DHP could also be used in Wales to make up the shortfall of the bedroom tax here. Will the Welsh Government be joining the calls from the Scottish Government to lift that cap?
Well, first of all, we haven't done that so far because even if such a cap were to be lifted, we do not have the funds to fund it. I think probably 8 to 10 million is probably a more accurate assessment, but nevertheless it's still a substantial amount of money. And of course there's the issue of why devolved government should be paying for what is the responsibility for non-devolved government. And there's a sense of hazard there, of course. In Scotland at the moment, for reasons that we all know, the Scottish Government is promising everything and anything in terms of finance without identifying where that money is actually coming from. But my view is the bedroom tax is iniquitous, and she will agree, I know, with that, and it is something that should be scrapped at GB level and not something that should be forced as an extra cost on Scotland and Wales.
First Minister, you have an opportunity to do something about something that is seriously impacting on many people right throughout Wales. Another way to address the shortfall, of course, would be through the reform of the Barnett formula. That would result in at least an additional £300 million to the Welsh budget. This is something now that you've made a condition of your support for the devolution of income tax powers. You've yet to give a commitment from your party to reform Barnett should you win the UK general election in 2015. And when you had the chance to do it last time, you didn't take it. So why should people have any faith that you will do it next time? You have an opportunity here this afternoon, First Minister, to give me a straight answer on this. Would a Labour government in 2015 reform the Barnett formula and introduce fair funding for Wales? Yes or no?
It's my strong view that fair funding should be introduced, and I would want my party to do exactly that
yes
in terms of the general election from 2015. We're not in disagreement over that. We all know that fair funding is important. We all know that Barnett has a limited shelf life, but also it's worth emphasising, of course, that it's not just to do with Wales. That's why it's important that fair funding is looked at from the perspective of the whole UK, and we know the situation in Wales in the future. And so there is no disagreement, I believe, between herself and myself. We both say that there is a need to examine fair funding in the future and make sure Wales is properly funded, particularly, of course, in accordance with the evidence we've seen from the Holton Commission.
We now move back to questions on the paper, and question 3, Mark Isherwood.
Will the Minister outline his policies for economic growth in Wales?
They're in the programme for government.
Thank you. Well, given the latest GVA figures showing that Wales remains bottom in terms of wealth creation, value of goods and services produced amongst the 12 UK nations and regions, and figures showing that the Welsh Government was only involved in 5 new companies coming to Wales last year, how do you respond to the several lost inward investors into North Wales who have written to me that saying following engagement with the Welsh Government they've taken the decision not to proceed, e.g. the manufacturer who said last summer we've been totally disillusioned by the performance of the Welsh Government, having both suffered heavy costs in terms of time, money and loss of revenue?
I have no idea who they are. Unless you're prepared to name them, I can't answer your question. That's the problem with unsolicited letters in this way. What I can tell you is you can talk to Tata if you want, you can talk to Airbus if you want, you can talk to GE if you want, you can talk to any number of companies across Wales who will tell you how much they appreciate what the Welsh Government has done for them. You will see from the inward investment figures, 191% increase, what effect we have had as a Welsh Government to bring investment into Wales. You will see the level of unemployment in Wales is at the UK average. You will see that the level of youth unemployment for those between 18 and 24 is way lower than the UK average. You will see that through our anchor companies, that those companies are very, very happy with the aftercare policy they lifted from us and then tried to disguise it as their own, that we give them. So the reality of the situation is the vast majority of companies who are in Wales, who are looking to come to Wales, are very happy with the support they receive from Welsh Government. And if he is willing to provide with details of this company, then of course we might be able to comment. But I have no idea whether this company exists, what the truth of the allegations are. He does this every time. But the reality is he's never going to get an answer unless he provides more details. But I know, looking at the figures in terms of unemployment and the economy, looking at the response we get from investors who are already in Wales, that they know the Welsh Government provides an excellent service.
Mick Anthony.
First Minister, will you welcome the remarkable and very, very positive progress that's being made on apprenticeships within Wales, where the completion of apprenticeships within Wales is at 85% compared to the English average of 74%. But equally importantly, of those at level 3 apprenticeship, within Wales the average being 90% going on to get full-time employment. And in Pontypridd, my constituency, the actual success rate in achieving employment is a remarkable 97%.
Well, I mean, looking at Jobs Growth Wales as an example, on the 10th of January we created 10,594 job opportunities, and 8,354 young people were in employment through Jobs Growth Wales. So our early progression figures in the programme show that 80% of the young people in the private sector strand, for example, who completed the 6-month opportunity are making a positive move into employment, an apprenticeship or higher learning. I suspect those are the best figures of any such scheme anywhere in Europe, if not the world.
Gwynaf Iorwerth.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Llywydd. Da ni'n croesawu'r ffaith bod eich llywodraeth chi bellach wedi ymrwymo i edrych ar syniad sydd wedi cael ei gyflwyno ganddyn ni ers tro o sefydlu banc i Gymru. Mae gwaith ymchwil eang erbyn hyn yn profi'r angen am fanc buddsoddi o'r fath. Rwan mae trafod y gymgynghori heb roi gwir ymrwymiad i weithredu wedi dod yn nodwedd eitha amlwg o'r ffordd mae'ch llywodraeth chi yn gweithredu. Allwch chi yn bersonol roi ymrwymiad o gefnogi bod eisiau sefydlu banc buddsoddi o'r fath i Gymru?
Wel, wrth gwrs, mae hwnnw rhywbeth sydd wedi cael ei ystyried gan Gweinidog, a mae hwnnw rhywbeth sydd yn cael ei ystyried yn y fanwl ar hyn o bryd. Unrhyw beth, wrth gwrs, sydd yn gallu cael ei wneud i helpu busnesau yng Nghymru i gael mynediad i gyllid. Mae hwnna'n rhywbeth byddwn ni'n croesawu. Wrth gofio, wrth gwrs, bod e ddim yn bosib bod rhaid yn ofalus i sicrhau bod ni'n sefydlu banc sydd yn gynaliadwy. Pawb yn deall hynny, ond mae'r Gweinidog wedi, wrth gwrs, wedi gweud i barn hi ar hwn.
Elena Parrott.
First Minister, Wales's brand strategy is crucial to growth, particularly when it comes to attracting inward investment and exporting. However, notwithstanding the Just Ask Wales campaign, several key stakeholders have told the Enterprise and Business Committee recently that they don't know what Wales's brand strategy now is. Do you have a current brand strategy for Wales? And if so, will you publish it so that all of those people who are concerned with selling Wales abroad can sing from the same hymn sheet and present a coherent and consistent message to the world?
Yes and yes are the answers to those questions. And indeed, if you look at the advertising campaigns that we are running, you will see, and we're looking now at running adverts on the London Underground, you will see that we have marketed a particular brand as far as Wales is concerned, a brand that concentrates, if I may put it this way, on a small country that does things well. I think that is where we should place ourselves in terms of the rest of the world.
Christian Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, young people disengaged from education, employment or training has held back economic growth and cost billions yearly, and it also costs young people. And I do welcome the recent work your government has done around the early identification of those at risk. As the early identification guidance recognises, this then relies on the work of partners such as Youth Services, Schools and Careers Wales, and I am concerned that current budgetary constraints may impact on ability to deliver. How will we ensure that this isn't the case, and how else will the success of these initiatives be measured?
Well, if we look, for example, at Jobs Growth Wales, that's already been mentioned in terms of its success. But another example, the Youth and Entrepreneurship Strategy. For example, we know that recent studies show that 53% of young people under 25 now have entrepreneurial aspirations, 9% up from 2004. And the number of young people starting up in business has also tripled since 2004 and is higher than the UK average. On top of that, of course, we are working with organisations such as the Prince's Trust to support unemployed and disadvantaged young people aged between 18 and 30 to consider if their business ideas are viable and whether self-employment is right for them. I believe that with a number of young people who are neat at the moment, that they have potential to set up their own businesses. They have good ideas. They just need the support in order to do that. And I believe that using the youth entrepreneurship strategy and also, of course, the working with organisations such as the Prince's Trust, we can deliver that.
Question 4, Sandy Moyes.
Officer. First Minister, will you provide an update on the Fresh Start Wales campaign to make cars smoke-free when children are travelling as passengers?
Well, recent campaign research shows the percentage of people reporting that smoking wasn't allowed in their main car has increased to 78%. Those figures also showed that around 90% of respondents agreed that second-hand smoke can harm health and that parents should not smoke in their cars. The member, of course, will have knowledge of the studies that are taking place, which will inform any future decision.
As you say, there are new figures, but they still indicate that a disappointingly 22% of people say they'll continue to allow smoking in their cars under any circumstance. If that figure is correct, it's clear that perhaps the dangers of exposing children to second-hand smoke just aren't getting through. So, First Minister, can you outline the timescale for considering legislation and implementing a ban on smoking in cars when children are present?
Well, Cardiff University was commissioned to carry out a study of primary school-age children's exposure to second-hand smoke. That data will be collected in the spring of this year. The results will be available in the summer of this year. And then, of course, dependent on those results, a decision will be taken as to whether to move ahead with the ban or not.
Thank you. William Graham.
First Minister, in view of your earlier replies, would you help identify and publicise key messages regarding the dangers of smoking in cars with children present, the toxic mixture of chemicals released by smoking remain in the vehicle's upholstery, clearly even when the children are not in the car and they're exposed to that, and that opening the car window does not disperse these chemicals?
Well, the Fresh Start campaign, of course, has emphasised the risks. That will run until March. There has been a large amount of promotional activity. Some 31,000 packs have been distributed, and of course members will be aware that Fresh Start Wales sponsored the ITV Wales Weather, S4C Weather and Scorio during the period of between autumn of 2012 until August 2013. So a number of outlets have been used in order to promote the campaign, and we await, of course, the results of the university's research in the spring, with a view, in the summer rather, with a view then to taking a decision as swiftly as possible.
Jocelyn Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, it's a little while since I asked you about banning smoking in cars where children are passengers. Since then, I've heard from a number of people, obviously who fall in the 22% who think it's okay to continue smoking with their children in the car. They oppose the ban, arguing that their car is their private sphere and governments shouldn't intervene. Do you think adults have a right to damage their children even in their private sphere?
Well, in terms of smoke, of course, where people wish to smoke in their own cars, on their own, that is, of course, a matter for them. But where children are in the car, then, of course, that second-hand smoke damages the health of children who have no choice in the matter. And that is the difference between banning smoking in cars full stop and banning smoking in cars where children are present. That's why, of course, it's so important for us to see what the results are of the survey and ultimately, of course, to take action if it is needed.
Question 5, William Powell.
Diolch yn fawr, Llawydd. Will the First Minister please make a statement on rail services in Mid and West Wales?
Well, our priorities are ensuring that we have a transport infrastructure that improves economic competitiveness and, of course, provides enhanced access to jobs in all parts of Wales.
I'd like to thank the First Minister very much for that answer. Along with colleagues around this chamber, I've been campaigning hard for the delivery of the hourly service on the Cambrian line, and I very much hope that that will be coming forward in the near future. But one aspect that's sometimes forgotten is the potential impact that enhanced service could have on those who own and farm land on either side of the line. And in that context, just last week, I met a farmer from Llanbryn Mair who currently has to wait 20 minutes before any approaching train in terms of crossing the line with either machinery or indeed with livestock. And in that context, First Minister, will you please ensure that working in partnership with the relevant authorities, those business people and communities which are split by the line are not adversely affected and that sufficient resource is put aside to ensure that the necessary infrastructure is fully supplied?
It's an interesting point, of course. I can say that the Cambrian Rail Implementation Group was set up to look at the recommendations of the demand surveys that took place up to the 27th of November. That group's report is being considered at the moment, but the issue of those who cross the line, I'm sure, will be considered as part of the process of looking to get to a situation where the service is more regular.
Keith Davis.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, mae ein seilwaith gan gynnwys gwasanaethau reilffyrdd ar ôl hanfodol mewn hybu twristiaeth. Dwi'n croesawu'r cynnydd mewn ffigurau twristiaeth Cymru, yn enwedig bod gwariant cysylltiedig lan bron i 12%. Mae reilffordd calon Cymru wedi roi'r achos am gael tren golygfaol yn ystod yr haf, rhywbeth maen nhw wedi codi gyda'r gweinidog economi, a fyddech yn fodlon ystyried sut y gall mentre o'r fath gan ddefnyddio ein gwasanaethau reilffyrdd hybu twristiaeth yng Ngorllewin Cymru.
Wel, wrth gwrs, rhywbeth ddiddorol dros ben. Dwi ddim yn ymwybodol unrhyw cais ariannol sydd wedi cael ei wneud lan i nawr, ond wrth gwrs mae'r rhoiffod ei hunan yn un sydd yn tynnu llawer o bol yn wedi yn yr haf mewn i'r ardal rhwng Llanelli a Mwythig. Syniad diddorol dros ben, ond ynglyn â unrhyw ymrwymiad ynglyn â chyllid, wrth gwrs, bydd yn cael ei ystyried yn y ffordd iawn.
Byron Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I recently met with volunteers and key organisers of the Gwili Railway Company. They've undertaken some fantastic work, in fact, to ensure the railway between Carmarthen North and Llanpimsaint has a future. With their most recent extension to the line, they'll be able to provide improved facilities for travellers, and they are, however, desperately in need of significant car park extensions. Will you look at what assistance the Welsh Government can give to assist in securing land and necessary grants or funding available for this development?
I'm sure I'll be able to discuss it with them because I am, in fact, opening the extension.
Gavin Ellis-Thomas.
Diolch yn fawr, Bonesig Llywydd. Mi fydd y Prif Weinidog yn gwybod yn dda am reilffordd arfordir y Cambrian a'r difrod mawr sydd wedi digwydd yn y stormyr diweddar. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog sicrhau ar ran Llywodraeth Cymru bod na gydweithrediad llawn bob amser rhwng network rail sydd yn brif amddiffynydd rhag risg gorlif o'r môr am filltiroedd o'r rheilffordd yna, a da ni'n gobeithio cyfarfod â nhw dydd Gwener nesaf. Neith o falu bod na gydweithrediad ynddyn nhw a Chyfoeth Naturiol Cymru a'r holl randdeiliaid eraill i sicrhau bod amddiffyn rhag risg llifogydd ar yr afordir yna yn cydlynu a'i gilydd yn glir ac yn ddiogel.
Wi'n credu bod yn rhywbeth hollol synhwyrol wrth gwrs mwyn sicrhau mwyn lleihau'r risg yn y dyfodol. Gaeth ddweud ynglyn â'r rheilffordd, y gobeith yw bydd y rhan o'r rheilffordd rhwng cyffordd Dyfi a'r Bermo a'r Agor dydd Llun nesaf, a gweddill y rheilffordd wedyn ni ymlaen i Bwllheli a'r Agor yn gyfan gwbl erbyn canol mis Mai. Na beth yw'r amserlen sydd wedi cael ei roi i ni gan Network Rail, a gobeithio wrth gwrs bydd hwnna'n digwydd mor gynted sy'n bosib mwyn sicrhau bobl yn gallu defnyddio'r trenau unwaith to.
Question 6, Kirsty Williams.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the future of farming in the moorlands of Brecon and Radnorshire?
Well, the actions recommended to ensure a sustainable future for farming in the moorlands have recently been published by the Kevin Roberts Review, and of course we will continue to support mechanisms through the CAP to support upland farmers.
First Minister, the decisions already announced by your Agricultural Minister will have a devastating effect on the incomes of family farms in the Elan Valley. To give an illustration, one farm will see a 79% loss in their income, another 69% and another 76%. That's pretty typical of the situation in the valley. Now, contrary to the stereotypes I often hear from members behind you, these aren't asset-rich fat cats sitting on a lot of land. These are tenant farmers who are trying to eke out a living in some of the most difficult and inhospitable places to farm in Wales. What confidence can they have that any yet-to-be-announced schemes under Pillar 2 will secure their and their families' futures in the Elan Valley?
Well, we are aware, of course, of the situation that faces and has always faced Welsh farming, namely that without the subsidies, Welsh farming simply isn't viable. It needs subsidies in order to survive. That is something I knew full well in my 6 years as a minister responsible. But that doesn't mean it should be like that forever. And that's why it's important that where we look at securing extra money to make farms more viable in the longer term, that money is made available. The CAP budget will reduce. There's no question of that over the next 5, 10, 15 years. There will be less money available to support farmers. It makes perfect sense then for us to be able to provide the financial resources for farms to become more self-sufficient than they are now, because a number of farmers, as we know, they wouldn't exist if they were conventional businesses. So I understand the point in terms of support, but it's also important that there's sufficient resource available to help them become sustainable businesses in the future.
Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the Vice Chairman of the Farmers Union of Wales Marginal Land Committee said this: we've gone from a system where we had LFA payments which were administered fairly and easily to a system where farmers have to jump through hoop after hoop after hoop. It has gone from a very simple system to one which is very complicated and restricts production. Meanwhile, our main competitors in Scotland and Ireland still receive LFA payments without hoops or restrictions. First Minister, will you and your government commit to removing those hoops and restrictions and look at an ANC scheme that can benefit the farmers, particularly above the moorland line?
Historically, we have provided very good support to farmers in the DA and the SDA. It is slightly odd because if this is any other sphere of business, the Conservatives would be saying you need to make sure when you give money out that there are controls over that money. But with farming, it's the complete opposite. Now, I don't think that's in farming's interest to do that. I think it's important. What she describes as hoops. The reality is that where public money is distributed, it's absolutely fair that there are controls over how that money is distributed. That is perfect common sense. And the reality of the situation is, I know full well, as will Alan Davis speaking, to her party in London, they couldn't give a monkeys about the LFA. They're only interested in large arable farmers. They're only interested in the very large farms in the lowlands of England. And that is something I've come across in the past. I know Alan Davis has come across in the past. So I know full well that if her party were in charge, they have no interest at all in small family farms. They are in hock to the very large farms that don't exist in Wales. So I take no lessons to the Conservatives. I've seen the way they operate at European level and the fact they have no interest whatsoever in small family farms, particularly in the uplands of Wales. We will always make sure that we have a fair settlement for our farmers in Wales, and that has always been the case.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, wy'n credu bod dyfodol I ffermwyr yn y fostifoedd, a wy'n credu bod ni wedi gweld peth o dyfodol hwnnw wrth ymweld a lawnsiad ganolfan ymchwil Pwll Paiwan gyda'r Gweinidog a wythnos diwetha.
Ond y hyn y byd, mae bobl sy'n gyfrifol am y tiroedd hyn, sef yn benodol y ffermwyr, yn wynebu tofiadau yn eu cymorth daliadau, a heb gweld y weledigaeth sydd gan y Llywodraeth o beth sy'n mynd i ddod yn ei lle, beth sy'n dod o dan pil 2, a beth sy'n mynd i fod yn y cynllun datblygu gwledig. Fedwch chi heddiw fwy rhyw fath arwydd i'r ffermwyr hyn o'r fath y dyfodol i chi'n gweld nhw chwarae yn cynnal y rostiroedd ar gyfer ffermio ac ar gyfer y dŵr glân sydd angen arnyn ni.
Mae'n hynny'n bwysig, a mae'n bwysig dros ben bod ffermwyr yn deall bod yr arian hynny'n mynd nôl i ffermio, ond mae rhaid wneud rhywbeth mwyn cael yr arian. Mae'n credu bod rhywbeth hollol teg ynglyn â, wel, mae'n wir beth bynnag ynglyn â ffil 2. Mae'n wir i weid bod gan ffermwyr Cymru rôl allweddol ynglyn â'r ffordd maen nhw'n gweithio'r tir, y ffordd wrth gwrs maen nhw'n sicrhau bod llai o ddŵr yn mewn i'r afonydd, dilyn gyda llifogydd, rwy'n gweld yn hunan ynglyn â phlenni coedwig ac yn y blaen, ag wrth gwrs ynglyn â rheoli'r tir. A broblem o'r blaen oedd, wrth gwrs, oedd yna ormod yn enwedig o ddefed. Oedd lot fawr o ddefed yn cael ei gynnal, oedd ddim o'n prynu, achos hynny oedd y pris yn dod ar ei bawb. Oedd yna ddim i ddiddordebau unrhyw ffermwr o gwbl. Ond, beth sy'n bwysig yw bod ffermwyr yn deall beth bydd yn y cynllun datblygu gwledig, ac wrth gwrs bydd y Gweinidog yn wneud yn siwr bod na ddealltwriaeth llawn ynglyn â ble bydd yr arian yn mynd ynglyn â ffil 2.
Question 7, Russell George.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's policies to develop renewable energy in Wales?
Yes, they're in Energy Wales, a low-carbon transition.
Thank you, First Minister. It was disappointing to read the Nifro mid-term review, which stated that it was unlikely to achieve its ambitious targets for energy generation and job creation by the end of the programme in 2015. One of the key challenges highlighted in the review was the difficulties in obtaining planning permission and consent from local planning authorities and Natural Resources Wales, being perceived as being resistant to community energy, renewable energy, and the benefits to the community. The Minister for Natural Resources often tells us that NRW is enabling, but in this circumstance, it seems there's a difference of opinion here. I wonder if you could comment on who is right.
It's clear to me that local planning authorities are turning down a large number of planning applications for renewable energy. As far as NRW are concerned, they must make assessments when they are asked to make those assessments. But it's also true to say, of course, that the vast majority of planning applications, all large planning applications, sit outside the purview of Welsh Government. This is a problem that we know has been the case for many, since the Assembly was set up. And I know the view of his own party on this, as well as mine. But I would encourage local planning authorities to look very carefully at the community benefits that can accrue, and the register is very important in that regard, when renewable energy projects are set up in their area. It's not a case of nothing being made available to local people. There's a substantial financial dividend. He will know in his own constituency in Carno, of course, of how important that is to people who live in that area. And I would urge local planning authorities to consider the register of community benefits and make sure that they do seek to get the fullest community benefit from planning applications as they consider them.
Lle Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. Scotland has a target, of course, of generating the equivalent of 100% of its electricity consumption from renewable energy by 2020. What's your target?
Well, you know that our target is lower than that, and you'll know that the reason for that is that we don't have full control over energy resources and in terms of energy consents. He will know, and I've said this many, many times in the Chamber, that we want to see a situation where we are not disadvantaged when compared to Scotland and Northern Ireland, particularly with regard to energy consents and particularly with regard to the subsidy system. The reality is that Scotland can throw money at marine energy projects, despite the fact that circumstances they are less promising than Wales, because they control the level of subsidy. They're in a position, in effect, where their level of subsidy is paid for by English consumers, which is a very happy place to be if you're Scotland. We don't have that. And that's why it's so crucial that we have energy consents devolved in the same way as Scotland, and also the subsidy system. That will create a fair level playing field between us and the Scots.
Question 8, Paul Davis.
Diolch Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am yr hyn y mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn ei wneud i wella gwasanaethau iechyd yng Ngorllewin Cymru?
Wel, mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn cefnogi byrdde iechyd lleol i ddarparu gofal diogel o ansawdd uchel i gleifion yng Ngorllewin Cymru.
Mae'n amlwg, Prif Weinidog, fod cae neu israddio gwasanaethau yn cael effaith ar wasanaethau eraill mewn ysbyty, a rydyn ni wedi gweld hyn yn ysbyty Llwynhelig yn ddiweddar, lle mae Llywodraeth chi wedi penderfynu cae'r uned gofal arbennig i Fabanod, a nawr mae yna gynlluniau i israddio radran pediatreg. Dwi'n siŵr bydd y penderfyniad i israddio'r adran pediatric yn cael effaith negyddol ar yr adran bris a damweinia. Bydd gorfodi plant a phobl i drefeili ymhellach am wasanaethau bris yn peryglu bywydau pobl. I ystyried bod hi'n amlwg nawr fod yr ysbyty yn cael ei israddio, gallwch chi, Prif Weinidog, ymrwymo i sicrhau y bydd y gweinidog iechyd yn wneud datganiad llawn ar ddyfodol ysbyty Llwynherig mor gynted ag sydd yn bosib?
Wel, gai ddweud yn gyntaf bod na ddim broblem ynglyn â dyfodol ysbyty Llwynherig fel ysbyty cyffredinol rhanbarthol. Ynglyn â beth wedodd yr aelod, wel, mae'n wedi gweud hwn sawl gwaith wrth gwrs. Mae'n gweud bod yna benderfyniad wedi cael ei wneud gan y gweinidog, heb ystyried wrth gwrs y ffaith bod hwn yn benderfyniad sydd wedi cael ei wneud ynglyn â argymhellion doctoried. So felly, os mae'r gweinidog ddim yn iawn, mae'r doctoried i gyd yn anghywir hefyd, sef doctoried obstetric yng Nghymru, sef yr arbenigwyr oedd ar y panel, maen nhw yn anghywir hefyd. Wel, dwi ddim yn credu allif unrhyw gweinidog call i osgoi argymell sydd yn cael ei roi i weinidog sydd yn gweud mae'r rhaid i chi wneud newidiadau mwyn sicrhau bod gwasanaeth yn saff ac yn gynaliadwy, yn gwmws beth oedd yr argymell. Y reality yw, y dewis yw glan gwili neu Llwynherig. Dim modd cael dau fel uned lefel 2, so felly beth oedd rhaid ystyried wedyn ni yw ym ble dy'r uned na i fod. Y broblem sydd yn Sir Benfro yw'r ffaith bod yna ddim ddigon o enedigaethau yn digwydd mwyn sicrhau uned lefel 2. Nid yw barn y Llywodraeth, nid yw barn y doctoried, nid yw barn y colegau brenhinol. A gai ddweud, ynglyn â unrhyw fath o beryg i fywyd, dyn ni ddim yn derbyn hynny. A gai ddweud pam. Pan weles i beth ddigwyddodd i sefyllfa Kate Sutton, a mae wedi sôn wrth gwrs, fi'n deall ar amser, ond mae hwnna'n bwysig llywydd, gofynes i'r swyddog meddygol cyffredinol, prif swyddog meddygol cyffredinol i ystyried beth oedd y sefyllfa mwyn gweld a bydde unrhyw newidiadau yn Llwynherig yn peryglu rwy'n fel hi yn y dyfodol. A ddebyw na. O achos y ffaith oedd hi achos hi yn achos argyfwng a damweiniau, a bydde dal i fod yn iawn bod rwy'n fel hi yn gallu cael triniaeth yn Llwynherig ta beth yw'r sefyllfa ynglyn â'r penderfyniad. Mae'n bwysig dros ben i ddweud hynny. Allwn ni ddim derbyn bod y sefyllfa ynglyn â'r newidiadau sydd wedi cael ei ddweud gan y gweinidog mynd i beryglu bobl fel hi yn y dyfodol. Ond hwn yw barn meddygon ei hunain a nid barn gwleidyddion. Dyna felly yw'r problem. Mae'n rwydd wrth gwrs i wleidyddion i weid, wel, mae chi'n neud hyn a hwnna, ond pan mae gyda chi argymhellion cryf, pan mae gyda chi doctoried ei hunain yn gweud bod rhaid i chi cael newidiaeth, wel, pa wleidydd call sy'n mynd i weid, dwi'n mynd i osgoi hwnna. Beth sy'n digwydd i insurance y doctoried? Byddai neb yn insiwr yna, yn amgalliadau fanna. Beth byddai'n digwydd sy'n rhywun yn marw? Pwy byddai'n cael y bai? Y gweinidog a'r doctoried. Dwi ddim mor rwydd. Wy'n deall beth faint mor gryf mae teimladau yn Sir Benfro, ond mi'n bwysig dros ben bod bobl yn sylweddoli beth yw'r problemau a beth yw'r heriau a beth mae rhaid i ni i sicrhau bod ni'n ynglyn â'r argymhellion mwyn wneud penderfyniad call a saff.
Rebecca Evans.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, recruitment difficulties have been cited by Hywel Dda UHB as a key reason for the decisions behind the service change in paediatrics, although local people and the CHC have questioned this. Will you investigate the circumstances around the failed attempts to recruit to paediatric posts so that we can be satisfied that all efforts have indeed been made to appoint people to those positions?
Yes, I can tell the member that Hywel Dda has experienced continued difficulties in recruiting paediatric consultants in Pembrokeshire for some time. One post has remained vacant despite being advertised for over a year and the job description having been rewritten to make the post more attractive. At middle grade level, there have been successive vacancies in Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire. Part of this is because both those hospitals rely heavily on recruitment from the EU and outside. Heavily. If they weren't able to recruit from outside the EU, they'd have enormous problems in terms of recruitment. The difficulty is that those people who come quite often move on very quickly. They move to more urban areas very, very quickly. They don't tend to stay. Some clearly do. And so that is the reality of what Hywel Dda had to try and deal with. They did undertake a recruitment drive within the EU, but they weren't able to fill all the posts that they needed to as a result of that recruitment drive. What I can say is, however, that additional vacancies will be created in Withybush at junior doctor level when the paediatric training rota is centralised. Again, what the college said was that it wasn't possible to have paediatric training at 2 sites separately. They wouldn't back it. The deanery, I beg your pardon, they wouldn't back that situation. So Hywel Dda on this occasion certainly have tried to recruit people into those posts, but unfortunately it's proven difficult. It is a historic problem, but nevertheless I'm sure they will continue to make sure that they look to recruit further in the future.
Peter Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, as you know, many patients from West Wales use hospitals in the ABMU area, and I attended a meeting last week along with Bethan Jenkins regarding a number of patients in that meeting whose families and relatives are very unhappy about their treatment. There was over 100 people there. And those relatives felt very strongly that the current inquiries into ABMU and what has gone on in particular in Princess of Wales Hospital were not sufficient to meet their needs to have a proper investigation of their complaints. And they would like to see a public inquiry looking at this particular health board. Will you consider extending the current investigation into ABMU into a public inquiry to try to meet the concerns of those relatives and friends of patients who have suffered as a result of bad treatment in those hospitals?
First of all, it's important that there is an investigation, and that is happening, of course. The Health Ministers already said that, not only in terms of current practice, but as he said very clearly, in terms of historic practice as well. And the independent investigator is able to look at whatever they want to in terms of what report that they wish to produce. In terms of, my belief is that has to be given the opportunity to report first of all. The second point is that a public inquiry, you get £1 million for a public inquiry, that's a substantial financial commitment. At this stage, that wouldn't be appropriate, having already, of course, stated there is an ongoing independent investigation. I understand the Chief Nursing Officer met with a group, I think this morning or yesterday, to discuss their views, and I believe the meeting was a constructive one. But I do think we need to make sure that the investigation does take its course, and then, of course, it will be a matter for those who are aggrieved to see that report and then decide what their view is of that report. But changing horses halfway through at this stage wouldn't seem to me to make sense.
Thank you, First Minister.